What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Creativ Rise podcast. So glad you are here today. We're about to get into a phenomenal conversation.
Oh, it's so good. You know that we love our guest episodes, and you guys, this episode is with Mike Payne from Arcade, incredible agency owner.
Award-winning agency out of Canada, scaled to 20 people.
20 people.
In the last couple of years. Done really well. Partnered with his wife on it, so they've got a really cool dynamic there. He's an advertising expert. He's phenomenal at problem solving. We talk everything from like, what does it look like to scale? How do you really, he goes into a really, really good analogy about problem solving all the way into like how to develop an offer, how to start a conversation with a client to diagnose their problem. We go into everything on this conversation. You're not going to want to miss a second of it. So listen all the way through. He gives some little secret advertising tips at the end that we kind of just threw that question out there. So make sure you listen all the way through. And yeah, other than that, this is a really fun conversation. Yeah. Can't wait to get you in on it. Here's our convo with Mike. What's up, Mike? As he takes a drink of water, for anyone who's watching video, I start right as he's taking a sip from his Nalgene. Welcome to
grease the wheel.
Welcome to the show, bro. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I've been looking forward to this. Thanks for having me.
Of course. By the way, let's set the record straight right now. Are you a like hardcore Nalgene guy? Was that a Nalgene I saw? I'm pretty sure that was a Nalgene.
This is a Nalgene. It's one that we got for Waves, which is our podcast.
Come on. Custom stickers on the Nalgene. That's iconic.
We got to get some stickers for Creativ Rise. That's
awesome.
That's
iconic. That's amazing. Dude, welcome to the show today. We're so glad you're here. Can't wait to just get through this conversation. Christy and I are going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
Our viewers are going to learn a lot, and maybe you'll even learn something in the process of you communicating parts of your story. Yeah. Couple rapid fire questions. We do this with all of our guests as we get into stuff. First one's really simple, like one word answers or as short as you can keep them. Let's go through quick. Where are you from?
I'm from Ontario, a little place called Sarnia, Ontario.
Are you actually? I had no idea.
Right by the border.
I thought you were born and raised Alberta guy.
No, sir. I moved to Alberta in 2017. Never lived there before that.
Wow.
So,
hey.
I didn't live for a long time in Ontario, but it still feels like home when I go there. I love Toronto, although now Quebec I feel like is rivaling it for me. We went to Montreal last fall, Mitzi and I, my wife and partner, and man, Montreal is wild. I actually have never been.
Christy and I
know
almost
we
set up a trip
go.
to go at the end of the summer, but
you gotta go.
We want to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're from Ontario, but you now live in Alberta.
I do. Calgary, Alberta.
Nice. Amazing. Amazing. Okay, second question. What do you do?
Very simply.
Very simply.
Yeah,
what
so
do you do?
I'm one of two partners at Arcade, and we're a digital agency. We specialize in social media, email marketing, and paid media for typically e-commerce brands, although these days we're trying to carve out a little bit more space in the entertainment world.
Love it.
Cool.
That's so cool. And then
love it.
How long have you personally, Mike, been in the creative industry?
Since 2012. I went to school at the Edwards School of Business, expected to be an accountant.
Come on.
And then I took one accounting class and I was like, there's no way. And then I discovered marketing. I took a marketing class, thought it would just be an easy one. And then I was like, yo, I could do this forever. So I just stuck with marketing. And
amazing.
Then, got my first job in sales, but quickly decided I wasn't a huge fan of that, partly because of the industry I was in, and then just started a creative agency on the side with one of my best friends part-time. And then eventually went full-time with it.
I love it.
Sweet.
Okay, last question. What's something in business that you have flopped?
It's our favorite question.
Put it out on the table. How can we all humanize you before this conversation? Because we've all had a flop or two, or many flops.
Or many belly flops in business.
I've had many flops. I try to forget them because I prefer to focus on the positive things.
Probably
but
smart.
One that happened in the last couple of years that was really public-facing was we had just brought on a new client during COVID, and it was one of the top health systems in the U.S. We still have them as a client, fortunately. But we had to put out these social posts that was a partnership with another really like publicly present entity in the U.S. And it was focused on a patient story at this health system. And the creative went out. The creative was all approved. It went out. And for some reason, it cropped so weird that it cut the guy's head off in the image. And there was no explanation, but it was obviously our fault. And so that was like early in our relationship, and I didn't know if we were going to come back with that.
Oh,
from
wow.
But
if you could come back from the headless ad.
You can come back from anything.
I know, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like
a brand partnership.
Yeah. So like the social platform just like glitched and cut off the head or something.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, on Twitter, it's not like this anymore, but usually when you would post a asset that wasn't like
Yeah.
landscape, it would just crop in preview to
Okay.
be landscape, but then if you clicked it, it would still
It would go
expand
inside.
Right.
Yeah.
to be the full image. But I don't know what happened with this one. It cropped it like the preview usually does, but then when you clicked it, the guy's head still wasn't
Oh
there.
my
So
gosh.
You
it
could just
was-
claim it was for client confidentiality. I think that
Yeah.
that would have
Oh my
just
gosh.
really sealed
Okay,
the deal.
so you just said something there that I think is so interesting that we could do a whole other podcast on, but you said it was your fault. You said, it was kind of out of our control, but again, it's still our fault. I love that you said that.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
got so many other questions we want to move into, but I'm such a fan of statements like that because I'm so in the same boat. It's like at the end of the day, it's always your fault. It's always your fault.
Right.
How can you push it over
Yeah.
the line and make sure it gets there? Why do you have that perspective, and how did that perspective actually save you that client in like a minute? Let's do this, and then we'll move into everything else because that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And why? Hold on.
Yeah, I
and
think
why
it-
should other creatives really grasp that ideology as well?
Yeah, because I think that's just like a team mentality, and also because for us being in social media, if we're the ones clicking post, we're the last line of defense. So even if with that client and other clients, if we get creative from someone else or copy from someone else and something goes out and it's an error, it's still something that we need to own because we're the last line of defense.
Mm.
And I think that's always going to be what salvages the relationship. If you're obviously pointing fingers in other directions and try to do anything but accept responsibility, then that's not a relationship that's going to last a long time. So
Yeah.
fortunately we came back from that. And also that client specifically, quality assurance isn't a sexy topic to talk about, but that client on their own has been absolutely pivotal in forcing us to develop a really airtight quality assurance process for all the content that we distribute that we never even really had as a process previous to that relationship.
Wow, that's so good.
It's been a good steep learning curve. Yep.
Yeah. So
Very cool.
little blip, but that's probably given you guys, a huge upside. And like you just said, even the quality assurance stuff that's forced you to build.
Right.
That's phenomenal
So
going forward.
client
Okay.
first, that's
So,
great.
Mike, you're a dad, you're a husband,
Yes, sir.
you're you're super creative. You love coffee, correct? You
Big coffee guy?
I love a lot of beverages.
I feel like
coffee
Many
you're just in that
beverages.
whole scene of like you got all that stuff going on, and then you're also, like you said, you're a co-founder, you're a partner with your wife in a award-winning digital agency specializing in strategy, content production, social media, and email marketing. That's a lot of stuff. That's pretty impressive. What got you to where you are today? We're going to talk about lots of different things on that journey in a few minutes here, but in the next like 2 minutes, just describe to us, where did you kind of start? Where did you kind of go, and how did you end up where you are today, owning an award-winning agency that's been absolutely skyrocketing, especially through COVID, right? Like you guys, I remember just watching the growth through COVID. It's been amazing to watch. It's been so fun to watch. What got you here? Where did you start?
I started like everybody else, I think. Like I just realized I was excited about something, and I would way rather make money from something I'm excited about than just like clocking in at a job. I feel like anybody can relate to that,
Yeah, so
especially
good.
these days. So that's where I started, and I found a friend to do it with. I think you two are obviously partners, and I'm a really big cheerleader for partnerships. I just feel like doing what we do in a silo by ourselves is almost just like a futile mission. There's obviously people that have done the solopreneur route or the sole proprietorship route and succeeded, but for me, it's not going to happen. So finding a good partner, someone that I trusted right out of the gate, was absolutely huge for me. And we did it part-time. We didn't rush it. We did it on the side. We allowed it to be more of like a hobby or a passion, and just kind of treated it as trial and error. And as we learned some lessons and started to get a better sense of that unique thing that we brought to the space we were trying to have authority in, then from there it was pretty obvious at every step like how we move forward from here.
Yeah.
I don't know does that answer your question?
Yeah,
or you want
that's
me to-
great. I love that.
That's
I love how
great.
you said you're a fan of
Sweet.
partnerships, because we talk a lot about
100%.
on this podcast being a solopreneur. Most people that listen to this podcast are solopreneurs. And I think just to clarify, I love how you said you're a fan of partnerships. Pretty much what I heard you say was for where you were trying to go, right? Like you weren't, as I'm assuming as you started this, I know you said you started kind of as a hobby and it gradually built into what it is now, but you probably still at some level had some kind of conscious goal of like, but if I'm going to do this, I really want to do it, and I want to do it right, and I want it to be big, right?
Yeah.
Versus a lot of people, I think solopreneurship either works for them because they're like, well, I don't need it to be massive. If it can just pay for my living, slightly, and it can do this, then I'll be happy. If I get to do what I love and make 60 grand, that'll be amazing, right? Where you probably had a different perspective in mind. A lot of people do. So that's really cool. It's a cool, way you define that you're a fan of partnerships. And then for some people, solopreneurship's awesome. So here's what I want to talk about. I'm just going to rip through a couple topics, and then we're going to go from the bottom up. Okay. So you own your business with your wife. Big fans of that. Yes. Obviously,
we love that.
I think humans are designed to work with people they're so close with. That's my take on it. Can't wait to talk about that. Yeah. What a beautiful way to live life. You've built a team of 20 people. I think the last time we had chatted about this just loosely, or I'd even seen it on your story, maybe we didn't chat about it, you were at like 14, and I was like, wow, like this dude has exploded through COVID. Now you're at 20. That's crazy. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about advice for people hiring their first person, hopefully advice for people, once there are a few people in, and how you manage that. We want to talk about, in order to get to a team that size, obviously you have to have the right packages, the right services, the right offers for people. If your offers are confusing, the marketplace is not going to take it up. You're never going to scale. Yep. Definitely want to talk about that. And then the last thing that we're actually going to start with is I was blown away when we were on Clubhouse, when we first connected in a room with a mutual friend on Clubhouse. RIP Clubhouse. What a great time. What a great 3 weeks.
What a time to be alive.
An amazing 3 weeks. But that is where you and I first connected. And I remember we were talking, think about problem solving in the room. And you came in and you were just like, yo, I got this analogy. And you were speaking this analogy so clearly. And everybody in the room was just like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. And I just would love for you to kind of quickly talk about that analogy again and talk about not only what it is, but why it's so foundational to any success you've had, and why it's so foundational to any success we've ever had or we're ever going to have, and anybody who's listening is ever going to have. Because when I heard you say that, I was like, okay, he's literally putting a beautiful analogy to everything I believe in so strongly. Got to have him on the podcast to talk about it. So it started in a doctor's office. Why don't you talk about how that all goes down? Because it was beautiful.
Yeah, and first I got to say I can't take credit for the analogy. I got to give credit to a guy named Blair Enns, he's an author.
Cool.
I don't know if you two have heard of him.
No, I haven't. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, he wrote a book, super easy read for creatives and agencies specifically, called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto.
Wow.
And I feel like the title, it sounds like something you wouldn't want to read. But when you get into the book, it just makes it so plain. And we've really built our agency around the principles in that book.
Love it.
And part of it is that analogy. It all comes down to positioning. And the analogy of the doctor's office is like, you would never go to a doctor's office with an already prescribed illness and just tell them this is the drug I need. They would laugh at you, or they'd tell you to go somewhere else. But really a doctor, because they're such an expert in their field, and they know like the human anatomy so intimately, that no matter whether you have an opinion or not, when you walk into their office, they're going to ask you a series of questions, and they're going to determine exactly what the issue is and prescribe a solution. And they don't have to do it in a way that's abrasive, especially if you come in with an opinion about what you might be dealing with, because obviously what you feel and what you're experiencing is real, and it matters, and it helps them figure out what the solution is. But really it comes down to the same thing with creative and like marketing and everything. Like if you are going to, as the service provider, establish yourself as the expert, or in this case, the practitioner, then you need to establish that expertise in the first conversation. So when that client or that prospective client steps into your office or jumps on that Zoom link or whatever, no matter what their opinion is about what they need or what they've already prescribed based on their experience, sometimes based on bad previous relationships with agencies or creatives, you need to kind of have the authority and have the confidence to take a step back and say, okay, let's slow down here. Let me ask you a few questions. Let me really understand where you're at as a business or as an entrepreneur, and then we can agree on what the solution is. And that minute difference really sets the stage for a long-term, like flourishing relationship, because now you're in the position of trust.
Yeah.
And if they don't agree, if they feel like, no, that's not where we want to go with this, then you have the opportunity right there to just part ways and not go through the headache of trying to like play this game of tug of war of like who's in charge. like who's the expert, all that stuff. So
Right.
that could have saved me a lot of headache with my first venture into the agency space, and it's really been a big part of our success in this current one. So
I love that.
That's amazing.
So good. So well said.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love how you said that. And one of the other things that does, and I want to ask you how you do that in a second, but one of the other things that does, we say this all the time at Creativ Rise, you've got to diagnose, don't assume, right? When someone comes to you, diagnose their problem. Don't just assume their problem. And it often leads to a much more profitable, outcome, even for you, right? Like it's often a bigger deal. Someone comes to you and says, hey, we want a $3,000 video. And then you go, yeah, you need a video, but you also need a social strategy. You need a distribution strategy, organically and paid, and you need someone to execute that. Here's a, $8,500 retainer per month for the next 6 months. Like that's a totally different, financial position you're being put in to potentially receive. And it's a much better, ideally, result for the client. So not only does it help the client so much when you take on that personification of I'm the expert, I'm the doctor, let me diagnose you rather than assume, but brilliant. I love it. So Mike, how do you, this might be the question that people are sitting here asking, and I would love to know this as well. I know this is probably a long process, so let's not spend too much time on it because we've got a lot of other stuff we want to get to. But how do you start that process? And maybe what's one or two questions that really help you diagnose and really help you set that stage for how do I really make sure that I know the problem? Because a lot of the times we get DMs all the time from creatives going, how do I diagnose someone's problem? How do I make sure that I'm solving the right thing? Because we talk all day.
The problem?
We talk all day. Like, you got to give solutions. You don't sell services, you sell solutions. We're like, well, how do I make sure that I'm selling the right solution? So in your mind, what's one of the first couple things you do to make sure you're really going to get to the right, diagnosis. Right?
Yeah.
Diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, from my perspective, as long as I can avoid the really practical questions till the very end, like that sets me up for success to get the actual context. Because I think if we just address the practical elements of why they came to me or came to us in the first place, or came to you as a videographer or a photographer in the first place, then you're already kind of like ahead of the context. But for us, I feel like you kind of need to start at the beginning. So it's almost like a podcast interview. Like you get right on there and you just kind of ask them for the backstory. Like, how did you get here? Why are you even doing this? And like, what does long-term success look like for you? Not just like what's the thing you're trying to figure out what right now, but like paint the picture for me. And once I know the picture, then we can kind of start to understand like where are the gaps or what's the divide we're trying to cross. And then we can get into the practical questions because we've isolated the problem, So yeah, that's really it for me. Like, and I feel like I'm not a typical salesperson. Like, I think a lot of people have their sales process, and they may even, for their offer, they may have it really templatized, and that can work from like a logistics standpoint, but from a perception or like communication standpoint, no client wants to feel like they're coming in to work with you and you're just fitting them into a template.
Of course. So
putting them through the system. That's where I think the context conversation helps a lot. So then it really feels like the practical side of it, like, what kind of services are we going to deliver to you? Like, what are the benchmarks? What are we trying to achieve? How do we define success? That's the last piece of the conversation. And it's built on the whole picture that you've already painted in that conversation.
I love that. That's so good. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think it's so important how you connect the personal side to build trust, but then it also building that even personal side really does give validity to your painkillers that you're giving them, right? Like, I love how you flow from like, let's not talk about logistics. Let's not talk about how many hours it's going to take us or what our pricing is going to be right at the front end of the conversation. And I think that's where people get nervous on sales calls or like initial consultations. They get nervous, so they just start talking about logistics. I feel like that's like the first thing people go to. So I think setting yourself up for like a list of questions that's not about logistics that you start with will help lead to a much more productive conversation. I think that's so smart.
I love it. So to wrap that up, what's the one thing you would say to a creative who asked you the question, Mike, how do I make sure I'm diagnosing a problem well? How do you summarize everything you just said? If it was put on a billboard, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think really just understand the person and the picture. So if you understand the person and the picture, then you can easily identify the problem.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
love
kind of
it.
understanding the past and their future, which is cool.
Totally.
That's
So
sweet.
Yeah, a lot of P words in there.
yeah, seriously. Little acronym coming out of this. So
Come on.
you've built an agency, an award-winning agency with 20 people working for you. That's phenomenal.
Mhm.
The only way, I'm assuming the only way to get there is by being a great problem solver, like you just talked about, and building problem solving into the DNA of your organization, right? So everyone feels like they're a part of the team as making up one problem solving unit. Uh, in order to then do that, once you've solved the problems, you obviously have to, put the painkillers in front of them and say, hey, here's what we want you to buy. This is what's going to help you. And we would call that, those are your offers, right? Those are you've got your services is
Right.
what you do. You've got, your solution is what they get. And then your offers are like they're like the vehicle that, you're going to take people, through in order to get the painkillers. And if those aren't packaged properly, if it's confusing, if it looks like, money's falling out different cracks here and everything's not accounted for, that can be an easy roadblock for a client to move forward with you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming as you've built your agency, you've also had to put a lot of effort into going, how do we really simplify, clarify, and make sure what we're passing on to them is really results based. Talk a little bit about how important you think that is for creatives,
Mhm.
in this space, to make sure that their offers are clear, make sure their offers are actual solutions. A lot of people try and sell offers that the other person doesn't need. I always say, don't sell corn to a corn farmer. He doesn't need your corn, right?
Right.
So, like,
Yeah.
how do you at Arcade make sure that you're diagnosing properly, which we just talked about, and then that next step of going, okay, now that we've diagnosed, how do we then go find the prescription for them, and then how do you deliver that prescription? What do you think are some things that really help you do that well?
You know what I like about practitioners or like doctors in general is that they're usually a specialist in something. I know
Mm,
you've got your family doctors that are more general, but you also have people that are really specific about the type of body that they focus on, or like the type of surgery that they focus on, or the type of
Mhm.
treatment, or even naturopaths. Like it's more of a natural approach rather than a
yeah.
drug-based approach. And I think any creative or agency should have the same approach. I started an agency in 2012. It's different than the one that I have now. It was called Fancy. That was the one I started with my friend. And I think what we did well at that point was we understood what we were good at.
Mm,
And we also thought about, okay, where is there a gap? Like what specific part of the body or part of the industry do we want to focus on?
Mm.
And for us at that time, it was startups. So we created what we called a startup package because
mm,
we took the time to really understand that specific
yeah.
part of the anatomy or the industry.
Right.
And we understood that the pain points were that startups needed everything upfront right away, but they didn't
Mm,
necessarily have the funds to pay for everything upfront right away. So we created this
mm,
Mhm.
package that essentially financed everything over 12 months, but it allowed us to deliver everything they needed in the first 1 to 2 months. So that they
mm,
Wow.
had everything they needed for launch, but then they weren't bleeding themselves dry of cash right at the beginning. That was something we did right, but what we did wrong was like the pricing. We didn't charge enough because we were
mm,
young and we still felt like we had imposter syndrome. We had a
yeah.
lot to
Right.
prove. But we also tried to do too much for those
Mm,
businesses, and kind of at the time I think it was pretty popular to show up as an all service or a full service marketing
totally.
agency. So
Yeah.
Totally.
that it felt like that's who we were competing with, but
Mm.
we didn't realize we were kind of shooting ourselves in the foot by becoming generalists in the service that we were delivering. So
Mm,
we were
Yeah.
pretty specific about who we were doing it for and like the problem that we were solving, but our miss was that we were becoming generalists and we were doing it for cheap. So then when we started Arcade, that was kind of our opportunity to say, okay, we did these things right, but we did these things wrong. How do we fix that? So we came into the industry as a digital agency, knowing that digital was the future, that we didn't really want to dabble in print or more of like traditional approaches to marketing and
yeah.
advertising.
Yeah.
And we also were really specific still about who we were doing it for. So at the time, it was for e-commerce brands, direct-to-consumer products, and even more specifically, like lifestyle and fashion and beauty brands. So
Mm-hmm.
that was our cup of tea. We knew we could nail that every single time. So also, you come into conversations with prospective clients in that sense as like you already have part of the context because you know exactly the type of brand that you're talking to. So the
Mm,
only difference is like their unique story. What are they specifically passionate about, or what specific problem are they solving with their business or their product? So there was less variables in that situation. And then as far as our actual offer, it still sounds like a lot of services when you talk about strategy and content production and distribution on a variety of different channels like social or email or advertising, for example. But when you kind of funnel that into a really specific type of client and as one package, then it doesn't really feel like a generalist. It still feels like, okay, this is a digital expert that specializes in my kind of company, and they already know how to reach my kind of audience, and they already understand what I'm thinking about and what problems I'm trying to solve. So that's where it felt like we did it right this time.
Cool.
And then, yeah, I think we're still young too. Like we don't have as much experience as a lot of other agencies. So one thing that we talk about a lot is like, you can be a leader before you're an expert. And that comes back to that whole like practitioner kind of thing too. Like the most important thing outside of their expertise is that they know how to lead the conversation and make you feel safe and make you feel cared for. So for the people listening that aren't yet experts, like they might be new to this, they might be in their first couple of years or first $100,000 in a year kind of thing. You just practice being a leader before you're an expert. Have that offer defined, but really just focus on empathy and understanding and like confidence in the decisions that you're making so that the client feels cared for. And if you have that relationship and that trust, like you'll always get more cash, more revenue out of those relationships than you would just from like just closing the deal on a video rather than understanding the whole picture.
Oh, so good.
That's sweet.
Man, that's a great answer.
So
I love that.
So I know you talked about, okay, like last agency, you felt like you kind of niche yourself into a box you didn't really want to be doing, or you were doing way too much for way too cheap. And then you've now moved into something where, okay, we found kind of our bread and butter and we love it. When it comes to scaling, and I know you get really excited about scaling, and so do we really love talking about how do you scale your business. For the people that are listening that are like, hey, I've got something really small, but I really want to blow it up. When it comes to scaling and when it comes to offers, are you very like, we really customize like our packages for our clients, we customize our offers to each individual client we get based on their pain points to give them the right painkiller? Or do you guys set up like, here's what we do, here's our 3 packages, and they can pick from the 3 packages? That way it's simplistic and it just grows really fast when it's really clear. Where have you found the most success for the person listening that's like, I'm trying to develop packages, or do I just do everything really customized? Which one of those have you guys leaned into more, and have you found that helps?
Or a mix? Is it a mix?
I was going to say, it's basically both.
Cool.
I've done either on its own before. Like with the first agency I had, it was all about packages. And splitting it up and financing it. And then with this, when we started Arcade, it was really like, okay, let's really understand the solution and give you a custom quote or custom proposal based on what the problem is. And like that worked sometimes, but you're kind of going all in on that proposal when it's just one customized solution. And I don't think that fails because clients don't want custom solutions, but I think they also want to understand what the spectrum is. And that's where we've kind of found the middle ground. So we'll typically provide package options with the caveat of, hey, these aren't the be all end all of how we deliver our service, but this helps you understand the spectrum from like the canoe to the yacht. And likely you're not going to need the yacht today, but you are in the future. Like once we get our hands dirty and we do some stuff together, like we're going to grow to the yacht. But you also likely don't want to just start with the canoe because it's going to take you forever to get to the other side of the lake, you know?
Totally.
So there's this
that
middle
yacht,
ground
baby.
that we're shooting for. There's this middle ground that we're shooting for. Even though it's 3 packages, we expect for it to be the middle one, the second one. And we also kind of build the canoe and the yacht in a way to like push them towards the middle
price
one
anchor.
well.
That's super great. Yeah, that's cool. I like the mix. It just is, again, so client first, which is really cool. You guys are willing to be flexible with your clients, which I think is a huge key to growing your business, obviously.
Dude, Mike's crushing the analogy. I love the canoe to the yacht thing
canoe
too.
to the
like,
yacht.
Man, I'll eat that up all day. Come on.
That's good.
I think in analogies, so I'm going to be feeding
that's
them
great.
for sure.
Brilliant.
I love it. I love how we kind of been, I feel like this conversation is even chronological, and it goes like, okay, how do you at the outset figure out how to be a problem solver? Then how do you give people the offers? And then that'll help grow your company. And so let's talk about growth. Let's talk about how you've built this team of 20 people, which is huge for
awesome.
creative industry. That's so cool. Kind of what's some of your advice for people who are looking to expand? They're going, I'm a solopreneur right now, and I'm looking to hire the first person. What's your advice for someone who's looking to expand into a team-based business rather than a solo business? Because those are super different. What would be your advice for telling someone like, hey, you're ready when this?
Great
Yes.
question.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer to you're ready when is just like you can't do it all yourself anymore, or like maybe things are slipping through the cracks, you're making mistakes, or you feel like the service or the product you're delivering isn't the fruition of what you believe you're capable of.
Yeah.
Really, those are warning signs of like you're stretched too thin.
Gotcha.
And then like
That's good.
the what, or like how do you expand from there? How do you hire your first employee or contractor or whatever, or partner? Really, I think through trial and error, and I'm still learning as I go, but through trial and error, I would say focus first on hours and like time that you can bill for, or like a skill that you can bill for. Like, for example, it would be tempting, I think, for some solopreneurs to say, okay, the next step is I'm going to hire an assistant. But an
Right.
assistant isn't really billable. You know, it's helpful. It saves a lot of the monotonous tasks that you don't really want to do because you want to be a specialist. You want to be designing something or creating something.
Right.
But that doesn't really, their time doesn't really land on an invoice that you send a client, you know? So
Yeah.
what is actually the skill or the job function that you can hire out to someone that has skill and ability that actually amplifies the work that you're doing, and then their time can land on that client's invoice instead of being just an operating expense for you.
I love that. So that would be like, I'm hiring an editor. I'm a wedding photographer, and I'm hiring an editor because that's going to give me so much of my time back.
Huge.
Yeah, I'm hiring.
And that's hard. That's scary.
Yeah, totally.
That's scary. Like as a photographer or a videographer or something like that, for someone who's known by their customers as having a certain style, and maybe that's why they're being hired. It's scary going out and trusting that to an editor. 100%. But if you can take the time and do that work and like try a few different people and invest the time, knowing that there's this like long-term outcome from it, that if they nail it, suddenly your life gets so much easier and you can just be a shooter and you can just be the person with the relationship. That makes a huge difference. And suddenly you're passionate about it again. You know, it's not just, it's not like you're a slave to the creative. So
yeah, totally. What would you say to the person who's going, basically addressing almost what you just said, but what would you say to the person that's going, oh, I'm drowning in my business, Mike, I'm not delivering the product that I know I could. And I also just don't have time to do everything anymore, but I can't make that jump. Like I'm just too scared. And we find that's a lot of creatives, right? Because they can't give up the creative control on things. And so what they do is they hire VAs, they hire assistants. And there's totally a place for that. For some people, that's like works, right? Because they're not administrative. And so that's really pulling them back. But I love how you said hire something that's billable, right? Because that's actually going to be traction in moving your product forward and moving your experience forward. What do you say to that person who just can't make that jump?
I would say you can.
There you go.
I feel like sometimes you feel like you're in this like stuck between a rock and a hard place and there's no solution, but sometimes that's a little bit short-sighted, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but there's got to be a long-term solution. And I think anytime we feel like we're just giving more than we have, or like the output exceeds like whatever inputs we're getting, like we're not taking any time off, we don't have time for our family, we don't have time for our friends, we're a slave to this thing. Is that a short-term problem, like with an end in sight, or is that just the way you build your business isn't working and it's never going to resolve unless you change something drastically? I think really understanding that first is absolutely crucial, because every entrepreneur or solopreneur is going to have to go through that kind of period in their business at some point, but there needs to be a light at the end of the tunnel, because if there isn't, you're going to burn out. But if there is, you can really push through. Like any athlete or artist, you know, or an author writing a book, they're going to hit roadblocks, but they know there's an end, there's a final chapter, you know? So that's really important. And whenever I'm talking to people that are earlier in that process than me, that's kind of the advice that I'm giving. And then once they understand, okay, is this a short-term issue or a long-term issue? They know either I have to make a drastic change in my business. Maybe I even have to get a part-time job so that I have the cash flow to be able to like make some of these more sizable changes. Or if this is just a short-term thing, I just need to buckle up and like push through it. And then on the other side is the solution, you know? Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
That's
Love
great.
it.
That's really good.
Yeah. why don't we talk about working with your significant other or working with a partner just in general? And then I actually am going to add one more question I just came up with on the back end of that. I think it's going to be really fun. But Mike, talk to us about working with, for you, it's your spouse. Whether this is a brother, whether it's a cousin, whether it's a best friend, whether it's a girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, why do you choose to work together? And what advice do you have for people that are wanting to do that, but they've always heard the statement, never work with family, never go into business with someone you love, right? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think never do anything is just a generalization that you don't want to listen to. You know, I think everything like that is so situational, and I think like you want, if you're thinking about a partner, you want someone that you can trust, that you know has your back, and that you know has the same outcome in mind, the same objective, and that it's more than just a function that earns them income. It's like something that they've really set out to do. Like it's an outlet for what's inside of them, you know.
Totally.
So for me, the first agency I started, that was with my best friend, and everyone told me don't go into business with your friends, but that was a really, like, for what it was, a really fruitful partnership, and we're still great friends, even though we ended up buying them out eventually and then starting Arcade. But and then with my wife, I would say, like, it's not for everyone, but I think if your only reason is that people have told you not to, that's not a good enough reason.
Yeah.
If there's alignment, if there's a parallel between the two of you and like what you're working towards, and you both bring something unique to the table, that you can allow that person to run in that, and then you can do your thing, and kind of like co-labor, or like carry it together. Like, that's magic when it works, you know. But there has to be that empathy, like we talked about with client relationships. There has to be trust, there has to be respect. But I think really respect comes from that unique thing that you bring to the table. If you're both kind of generalists and both trying to do the same thing, and there's just two of you, you know, there's no benefit to that partnership. But like, she's really the yin to my yang, and it seems like the same with the two of you. Like, we're good at very different things, so she can just trust me with what I'm good at, and I can trust her with what she's good at. And I really feel like she's the secret weapon to our business. So I couldn't do it without her. So that's a good question too, is like, can you do it without them? If you can't do it without them, then you need them. And if you can, then either you don't need a partner, or it needs to be someone else.
Yeah.
Dude, that's a phenomenal
That's great.
answer.
That's really, really good.
That's such a good answer. Okay, here's the last thing that I want to ask you that's like planned, and then we have two questions that are like show standard, you know, famous questions on the
sign
show.
off questions.
Sign off questions. But you're an advertising expert. Your agency's an advertising, you know, award-winning advertising agency. There's a lot of panic right now with what it looks like to advertise your business now. And I want us to think, let's niche ourselves into the conversation of small business owner, under 300K, probably service provider, photographer, filmmaker, graphic designer, social
Creative
media
space.
strategist, you know, people in the creative space. A lot of people are going, organic does nothing. I don't understand paid. I don't have money for paid. Where do you think advertising is going right now? And what's your advice for people that are kind of in that space in their first couple years of business, or maybe they've been in for a while, but they're a service provider under, let's even call it $500,000. Like, how do you think they should be advertising their business, connecting with clients, and getting those offers in front of people?
Yeah, well, really, as a creative or an agency, I almost don't know if you need advertising at all. And I think it definitely shouldn't be one of the first steps. I would say, like, for a product or scalable service that isn't very custom, like, advertising is awesome. But really, we've never thought about advertising as a function for us as an agency to get more business. Because, you know, like, advertising isn't very personal. It is personal in the sense that, like, if I go on a website and I look at a product and I then get ads about it, like, I'm getting those ads because I was interested in that product. That's as personal as it gets, right? But other than that, it's pretty, like, objective, and it's really just about, like, want versus like, solution. But for us, like, we've always tried to, again, come back to more of a longer term perspective about the type of clients that we want to work with and how we want them to come into the fold of our agency. So we've more so thought about, okay, what's the best way to start a relationship right? To, like, even go into that first conversation with them feeling like they already know us and they know why they're talking to us. And really, that comes down to content. So and like really making sure that your content is more like brand rather than selling. For us, like
Mhm.
TikTok, for example, is something we just got into in the last 6 months as an agency, just for fun, just to try it, just to learn it. But that's actually become one of our biggest like referral sources, is just us
Wow.
goofing
Love it.
around on TikTok. And
Come
that's
on.
because there's a lot of brands out there that don't understand TikTok. They don't
Yeah.
know how it would work for them, whether it's organic or paid. And they also just don't want to feel like that an agency is desperate for their business. So for us, we've never had a sales call to action in any of our content. It's really been about delivering value or having fun. And sometimes we make fun of ourselves. Sometimes we make fun of our clients, never being specific, of course, but it's
Yeah.
really just about showing who we are, showing up and like making it obvious that we're experts without having to say that or like really talk people into believing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I would think about as a creative or an agency or like a small team, is what kind of content that you can you produce right now that's valuable. It could be a podcast or a YouTube channel,
Yeah.
or how can you just have fun on the channels that people love to spend time on,
Yeah.
or in the context of whatever your deliverable is. So if you're a videographer, you know, like where is video happening? You know, where are people sharing the most video? Where are people consuming the most video? It's probably TikTok. And I know that
Agreed.
there's a lot of like directors and like videographers that feel some type of way about TikTok, that it's like diluting the like sanctity of video, and it might be, but they really
Get
want to be
over
an
it.
entertainment platform. Get over it,
Yeah.
because that's where your customer is, you know. So
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, that's what I think about. It's really like, if advertising is meant to be part of the mix, if paid is meant to be part of the mix, it's likely one of the last steps and not the first
I
one.
love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you build your business off of advertising and you do get leads or clients or sales from it, you're going to end up relying on it forever and being constantly afraid that if I turn off that switch or if I turn down that budget,
dead.
that all of that business is going to go away, and you never want to be in that position.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is master organic first, you know, and the page should be totally secondary. And I love that you
And
said
just a longer term perspective. So it's not just
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
like getting the sale. It's about showing who you are, establishing
Yep.
trust,
Mm.
not having to talk people into the fact that you're an expert, but it's just obvious based on the content.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. I love how
That's
you
good.
basically said just get on the platforms where your customers are and educate them. Educate them on, you know, what that solution is going to do for their lives. What's their business going to look like when they work with you, you know? And it's not a hard sell. It's just simple. It's value-based content. I love that. Okay, second to last question.
Yeah. Where can people find you? So if someone's listening to this going, this guy sounds amazing, I want to follow him, I want to follow his agency, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my handles are just Mike with 3 M's and 3 I's, because obviously there's lots of Mikes out there, so I couldn't just get the straight up
I love
spelling. Most active on Instagram. I consume a lot on TikTok and Twitter, and then LinkedIn is the same handle, and I do a little bit more on LinkedIn too. Arcade, you can find us at Hello Arcade on TikTok or Instagram. Those are the primary two. And then we also have a podcast that, speaking of like creating content that adds value, you obviously have that figured out with Creativ Rise, but that's something that we've been working hard on for the last few years, and that's called Waves Social Podcast. So you can find us on Instagram or TikTok or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
That's sweet.
I love it.
And everyone listening, we'll put that in the show notes as well, so you can hit that up.
Click on down there, and give that podcast a listen for sure. Signature question. You've obviously, well, I should start with this context because we've been talking about context today. Creativ Rise exists to help people break the creative struggle. That's the why behind our organization. It's why Creativ Rise exists, because you know we've at our bat at breaking that. It's changed our lives. It's changed your life. Why should someone care enough? There's so many people on the fence. They work so hard and then they get nervous. Things start getting hard, or you know, seasons of dryness come in their business, and the struggle just continues and continues and continues. Why should someone care enough to break the creative struggle the same way you have? Why should they do it?
Why should they break the creative struggle? I think they should only break the creative struggle if they know that they're passionate about it. If they're doing anything else, they're going to be laying awake at night, discontent, and like feel like they're just killing time at their desk job, whatever it is. I feel like, especially right now, I think about that a lot, because it's harder than ever to hire great people. And there's a lot of people leaving their jobs, which I think in the long term is a good thing, because people are starting to think about that. Like, do I actually care about this? or
Yeah.
is like my heart like pulling me somewhere else? And some people need more time to figure that out. Some people can actually like lay awake tonight and answer that question if they're honest with themselves. But if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, this is what I want to do more than anything else, then absolutely you should break the creative struggle and find a way to do it. And sometimes that means asking for help. Sometimes that just means like doing the hard thing. But it's different for all of us, but it's worth it for sure.
That's really cool. Oh, love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Maybe we'll have to have you back on with your wife. That'd be really fun, and do more of like a deep dive into like couples running businesses. That would be really fun. But we really appreciate your time.
I'll just be quiet and listen because she's a pro.
That's good. So thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Thank you both. This was a pleasure.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, baby. What a good conversation with Mike. That was phenomenal. I learned so much, even just listening and asking questions.
Oh, my gosh.
This is the best part of having guests on. You just get to learn things,
it's
especially when they're so well-spoken like Mike is.
It's literally so refreshing to be in a conversation with a creative who's doing stuff. They're actually in their own businesses, making things happen, making things work, breaking 100%. The creative struggle, 100%. Doing such like intentional things within their business and actually succeeding, and getting to ask those questions is just so fun to bounce ideas off of. I feel like we learned a ton. I know the listeners, you guys learned a ton from that too. If you're somebody who actually really enjoys doing that type of stuff with other creatives, with other businesses, and you kind of get discouraged or maybe like a lack of creativity when you sit by yourself and only work by yourself in your business day in and day out, and you feel kind of like, man, I could succeed a lot more if I was around a group of creatives that were all pumped and willing to share with each other on how they could grow. We have something for you. That's something that we noticed in ourselves when we were growing our creative businesses. We noticed that in a lot of our friends alongside us that were trying to grow creative businesses, is that when you're siloed by yourself, you just can't grow as fast as you could if you were surrounded by other creatives. So we formulated the Creativ Rise Mastermind, which is our 6-week signature course that's focused around coaching, community, and accountability. The 3 things that we really believe help grow and explode your creative business. And we are launching our next one this fall. We're so excited.
Like really soon.
Really soon.
Really soon. Guys, phenomenal module library of stuff, content that you just can't find the stuff on the internet. You can't find it on YouTube. You know, it's the content that you need to really grow that people just don't talk about enough. Tons of that stuff. You get it for life. Weekly coaching calls, a blast. So fun. That's where you get to meet the community. You get to ask any question you want, and so much more. Accountability groups, the whole shebang. So September 18th, we kick off September 18th. This will be round 8. This will push us over 200 people that have gone through this, which is just mind-blowing as we watch people build 6-figure businesses and get to do it in a way where they feel so supported. Like, it's just a phenomenal feeling. So cool. We always feel so fortunate to get to launch this thing and get to see people coming in the door. It sells out every single time. And so if you're not on the wait list for that, you got to get on the wait list. If this is resonating with you, you have to get on the wait list, because the wait list always fills it up. And the waitlist also gets early bird pricing and early access to apply. Now, why applications? Well, we always make things application only, because we make sure part of our job is to protect the room, make sure the communal aspect is really, really healthy. And so we just go through those applications and make sure that the right people are going to be getting the right spots in the room. So if that's you, super easy to apply. All you got to do, go to creativrise.com. You'll see application buttons, or you'll see waitlist buttons everywhere, and just jump on the wait list. It takes 2 seconds, and then we will be emailing you with updates on when applications go live, and then we'll see you in there getting kicked off on September 18th, which is going to be phenomenal. So can't wait. Guys, make sure you go follow Mike on socials. He's a blast to follow. He's got super sick style. So outside of business stuff, he's just a fun guy to follow. And obviously he has a massive amount of educational content that comes out through Arcade and through him that can benefit your business. So go give him a follow. And other than that, we'll catch you on the next one.
Cool. See you next week, guys.